Parenting is not easy. And this is especially true for Jews. Our responsibility as parents is twofold. It's not just to raise good and healthy and stable and productive and successful children. We also have to raise good Jews. It's not enough if our children are productive members of society. We want them to be outstanding Jews as well. And what does that entail? Well, to have a strong connection with their Creator, to have an appreciation of what it means to be a Jew, to have a connection with the Almighty's holy Torah, to understand the mission and the meaning of Judaism. So parenting is hard in general, and especially for us, it's even harder. And there isn't really a manual. So a lot of people are completely mystified about how to do it. A few months ago, I was invited by a group of young fathers in our neighborhood. They wanted me to give some parenting classes for them. And the truth is, I was quite flattered that they would ask me. I think it's a bit presumptuous to say that I'm an expert. My children are relatively young. Who's to say I know anything more than they do? It was also a bit of an realignment that I'm no longer one of the young fathers. I'm like old. I'm grizzled. I'm an old grizzled veteran. But the jury's out on my children. What's going to be? Who's to say that I'm an expert? So I start off by saying, listen, I have a disclaimer. I don't claim to be an expert. I don't claim to have all the answers. I'm not a guru, and I'm not so sure of myself. In fact, my self-assessment, my self-perception of how good of a parent I am, my parenting ability and aptitude, it was way higher before I had children. Before I had children, I got it all figured out. I got the plan. We know what to do. But children have a way of humbling you. So I want to make it clear at the onset, I told the group, I'm not claiming to be a parent. But I did say, number one, I have lots and lots of experience. I told them I have over 70 years of parenting experience. Why? Because I have 16 and a half years of experience trying to raise my son Akiva. And I have 15 and change years of experience trying to raise my son Yoshua. And 13 and change with my daughter Miriam, and so on. It's over 70 years of parenting experience. So maybe I could share a thing or two. Secondly, I told them, I'm not going to share anything that's novel, some sort of new insider perspective that I conceived on my own. I'm going to share with you ideas that I heard from my grandfather, of blessed memory, and from other great pedagogues, educators, and parents. And I'm also not going to get too specific. I don't want you to say, well, if what happens in this situation, how to respond to this and this dilemma. I'm going to share with you general frameworks, general heuristics that will be useful for you as parents. I did suggest that even if someone doesn't necessarily hear something that will stick with them, the mere fact that someone is spending an hour a week or so talking about how to be a better parent and thinking about that in itself trains your mind to be more vigilant as a parent. A lot of poor parenting decisions are made because, you just are acting in the moment and you're forgetting about the consequences of your behavior. You're forgetting about the fact that you're influencing a child that's going to impact them in a substantial way for their life. If you think about the fact that, well, I'm parenting, and you have that in your head, that will help you be a better parent. And the frameworks that I shared, I think they're helpful, of course, for parents and educators. And dare I say, it's helpful for all of us as well. A lot of the frameworks are going to be helpful for us as well. So what I want to do is share with you some of the ideas, some of the frameworks, some of the rules of thumb, some of the heuristics that I shared in these Sunday night classes and get-togethers. Okay, so let's begin. This is the first idea. I think it's so simple, but so powerful. It's a real empowering insight for parents and for anyone, really. If the Almighty gave me a child, there is no better proof in the world that the Almighty believes that I am capable of raising this child well. Parenting is a partnership. Parents and God. There are 3 partners in every person. It's a public-private partnership. It's a human-God partnership, so to speak. There's Father, there's Mother, and there's the Almighty. And the Almighty entrusted me with a child. He necessarily believes that I can be a good partner with him in this venture. So we may think of parenting, certainly someone who is troubled or baffled or puzzled by how to raise good children. You may think, well, this is some sort of arcane science. And maybe there are some individuals that have it figured out, but I'm just totally lost. The mere fact that the Almighty gave us a child, that is proof that we can figure it out. Parenting is something that all parents are capable of. I think there's a good framework to get started with because, again, a lot of parents today are quite mystified about what to do to raise a good child. Idea number 1, basic. Let's go to idea number 2, framework number 2. This I heard from my grandfather. Very powerful. A heuristic. All good parenting is good character. All good character is good parenting. If you see an example of good parenting, necessarily there's good character being displayed. And good character will make someone a good parent. And the reverse is also true. All bad character is bad parenting, and all bad parenting is bad character. What does it take to be a good person, to develop yourself, to refine yourself, to be a more elevated person? It means to acquire the traits that are maybe a bit hard to acquire. To become a more patient person, a more empathetic person, a more loving person, a more tolerant person, a more selfless person. We just described all the traits of good parents. To be patient, to be understanding, to be empathetic, to be loving, to be tolerant. These are all the traits of good parents. And they're also, coincidentally, the same things that we need to do if we want to be good people, if we want to develop ourselves. And of course, the reverse is also true. Just a couple of days ago, I went to the DMV, which they don't call DMV in Texas. They call it DPS. It's the place where you have to go get your permit and your license, register your car if you don't do it in the mail, something like that. You know what I'm talking about, DMV. The worst place on earth. And my son, Yehoshua, he's going to get his learner's permit. And he's not like his big brother. Maybe this is pertinent to parenting as well. Akiva, my oldest son, the day he turned 15, that's the day he got his permit. That day, not even a day later. And then you're eligible to receive your license at the age of 16. But alas, the day he turned 16 was a Shabbos. So you have to wait till Monday. But he's not waiting around. By contrast, my son Yehoshua, his birthday is in July. And he only got his permit in January. That would never happen with Akiva. Just different kids, different interests. That's one of the things you learn as a parent of multiple children is that everyone is different. But it was a helpful experience. We were there. We're waiting for like an hour and a half. You know what it's like. And I told him, I said, just to be in the room with people that you would never interact with necessarily it's helpful to see how the other half lives, so to speak. We were sitting next to this woman. She had 2 little kids, 3 or 4 years old, maybe even less, maybe even 2-year-olds. And I cannot believe what this woman was telling her child. She was screaming at them. She was cursing them in the most vile way imaginable. That waiting room was rated R. She was threatening them with violence. It's unimaginable what I was hearing. And I told my son Yoshua, do you think these kids stand a chance? Bad character is bad parenting. We could parent our children with anger. We could be impulsive. We could be impatient. I think that patience is maybe the most important characteristic to have as a parent, because children, they grow like trees. And if you want the tree to grow, you have to wait. You need 20 years of waiting. That's the most important trait when it comes to growing a tree from the ground. You just need to give it time. And if you're impatient and you want to see results right away, well, you're in trouble, because you're not going to end up with the results right away. And in fact, if you're constantly digging up the seed, what's going to be? How come the seed's not delivering on this tree that I was promised? You're actually going to ruin the experience. You dig up the tree before it's done, you've ruined the tree. Impatient parenting is bad parenting. Selfish parenting is bad parenting. Envy. Why can't you be more like Tommy? How come the other kids in the block are so respectful to their parents? How come you come to me with these terrible scores on your report card, and everyone else, they're doing so well? Bad character is bad parenting. So this is an interesting framework that if you want to improve your parenting, there's a way to do it that involves nothing to do with parenting. It's just character. If you improve your character, necessarily you'll be a better parent. And that's one example of passive parenting. The majority of the parenting that we do, it's actually not direct. It's not like active. Okay, I'm instructing my child to do X, Y, or Z. I'm guiding them. I'm a pedagogue. I'm going to instruct them and direct them in how to be a better person and how to be a more mature person and how to be successful in life. The overwhelming majority of parenting is invisible, is passive. You set a good example for your child. They have a framework of what an adult behaves like. How do you teach your kids? This is not something which non-Jews necessarily have to worry about. You want to raise good Jewish children, you teach them to say blessings. There are 6 food categories and 6 blessings that you say before each one of those foods, before you eat any one of those foods. Well, how do you teach that to kids? Well, the way you do it is by saying the blessings yourself. That's all you need to do. So you've trained your children. This is what we do. Before you eat a fruit, you say the blessing for fruits. Before you eat bread, you say hamotzi, and so on. You've just trained, because the child sees you, and that's the only adult they know. So this is how you behave, and this is how they are trained for how adults behave. And healthy children who have a healthy relationship with their parents naturally want to emulate their parents. So if you have a good relationship with your child and you're a good person, well, that's a magical formula, because the child naturally wants to mimic you, to copy you, to emulate you, and you're a good person. So they'll become a good person as well. So there was never a time where you sat down and said, okay, I'm a parent. I'm going to become an educator. I'm going to guide and direct the child. You just were a good person, and you forged a good, loving, warm relationship with your child. And the child naturally says, okay, this is what I want to do. Oh, this is who I want to be like. So much of parenting is passive. Good parenting is good character. Bad character is bad parenting. You want to become a better parent, become a better person, because those two are synonymous. Another framework. This is like not controversial stuff. I'm not claiming to be some sort of guru, some expert. I have all the answers. I'm not some oracle that spits out advice. This is just good advice. I think it's not even that radical of a position. It's consensus. Here's another framework. This is very helpful, in my opinion. We said earlier that children are like trees. You plant it, and you have to give it what it needs. You have to position it in a conducive environment. They'll grow on their own. The growth of a child, the growth of a human, it happens almost on its own. The Torah itself tells us that man is like a tree of the field. Ha'adam eitz hasada. Accordingly, if you want to raise a person, you want to raise them in the way the Torah tells us, like a tree. How does the tree grow? How does it get higher and higher and stronger and more stable? You don't have someone who actively comes and starts pulling the tree out of the ground. Trees will naturally grow on their own, provided that there's the right environment. If there's sufficient sunlight and enough water and the ground is fertile, that's all you need. And it will happen on its own. Well, if the child grows on their own, what does the parent need to do? What does the educator need to do? What does the pedagogue need to do? So my grandfather, a blessed memory, used to say, your primary job as a parent is to not mess the kid up, to avoid making mistakes. It's not about positively accomplishing, fulfilling, pulling the tree out of the ground. Create a wholesome environment, create a conducive environment, and they will grow on their own. Don't mess them up. You put the tree in the ground. It's a good seed. It's a good ground. There's enough sunlight. There's enough light. You have everything there. Don't mess it up. The Almighty will bring the child to success, provided that the environment is healthy and you don't mess them up. To me, I think this very much demystifies parenting. If we think that parenting, raising good children, there's some sort of elusive formula that we need to find. But how do I know what to do? If you're looking for some formula, well, that's maddening, because there isn't a formula. But if you think, I want to do whatever I can, and to use the best of my abilities, the Almighty, after all, trusts me, to make sure that the child has whatever they need. And I'm not going to mess them up. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to prevent any factors that can harm their growth. I'm going to remove them. That is a framework that I think is more doable for us. And my grandfather said this, and I even pulled the quote, because this is I think maybe a bit more of a new idea, of a novel idea. In my grandfather's writings, I found the following paragraph, and I'll translate it. An expert educator in reality does not effectuate anything. And even the best suggestions that they conceive and they come up with to influence their charges, compared to the result, they have nothing to do with the result. The result has to come on its own, with the help of the Almighty. So why do we need to have expert parents and educators and teachers and pedagogues? Because otherwise they would damage and ruin and corrupt their charges. So if you think of parenting, educating as not messing up, and trying to make sure that you're not making any mistakes, to me that's a much more manageable goal. And then I shared some ideas from the Torah. The first time the word chinuch, which is the Hebrew word for education and raising a child, first time it appears is as a name. Cain. Remember Cain? Cain and Abel, sons. of Adam didn't work out so well, you recall. Cain, after he murdered his brother, he has a child. And the first named child is Hanoch. Cain knew, so to speak, biblically knew his wife. The verse tells us, chapter 4, verse 17 of Genesis. And she becomes pregnant, and she bore Hanoch. And Cain built a city, and he named the city Hanoch, after his son Hanoch. So there's a little bit of an obsession here that Cain has with this word Hanoch. He names his son after it. He names a city that he built after his son whose name is Hanoch. There's an interesting bit of trivia that there are more individuals with the name Hanoch in the Torah. I think it's pronounced Enoch in English. I don't know how Hanoch becomes Enoch, but we'll just take it. There are more individuals with this name than any other name. There are 4 individuals with the name Hanoch. But the Torah tells us that he named the son this name, and then he named the city that he built after his son Hanoch. So I saw in one of the commentaries, they suggested something very interesting. Cain did something so unconscionable. He murdered his own brother. Why? Over something that maybe it's a bit petty. They both bring offerings, both bring sacrifices, and God accepts the offering of Abel and rejects the offering of Cain. And he flew into a rage and he murdered his own brother. And by the way, the verse tells us that God told Cain, the bloods of your brother, multiple bloods, plural bloods of your brother are crying out to me from the ground. Not the blood, the bloods. Why? So the Talmud explains, Rashi cites it. Because Cain murdered not only Abel, but all of Abel's would-be children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren and so on. So this is a crime of unimaginable proportions. How did this happen? So the commentator suggests that there was one really set of children that were born to humans and had no childhood. Adam and Eve are in a category of their own, the handiwork of God. But they bear 2 children when they're still in the garden. In the words of the Talmud, 2 went up to the bed and 4 emerged. There wasn't this whole 9-month waiting period. Imagine if you had to print a document and it shows up in 9 months. It wasn't like that. It was instant. And the 2 kids, they crawl out of bed right away. They're fully mature. They were the only 2 children born under the rules and the world before the sin. And the calculation actually says that the murder, the fratricide, Cain murdered Abel, it happened only 50 days after creation. So it's the very beginning of Genesis. And Cain spent his whole life trying to figure out, how did this happen? How did I commit such a grievous, unconscionable, unforgivable sin? I want to make sure that no one ever makes the same mistake. And he names his son Hanoch. Hanoch means education. Chinuch, education. And he builds a city and says, I'm going to name the city so everyone knows the township of Hanoch, the city, the metropolis of Hanoch. Education, education, education. He was just brought as an adult. He didn't have someone who guided them as a youth and trained them and molded them and formed them in a way that they mature properly. And that's what he pointed to as the flaw, so to speak, that led to his downfall. And maybe that's why there are so many people with this name, because it's such an important lesson for all of us to learn. Because if you don't raise children properly, they will be savages. And that's a terrible thing to say, but it's true. Humanity has the ability to become wild and criminal and violent and awful and terrible. And we know people like this, okay? And you certainly see them on the news. There are people that are savages. Where does that come from? How can a person come and shoot someone else and kill them? How's that possible? How are there people that are not realizing that they have souls and they have the ability to have a connection with the Almighty? And they're just looking for quick fixes to their problems, quick dopamine hits. How does such a thing happen? The lack of an education. They didn't receive the education that is needed. That's what Cain is warning us. There is an imperative to do this. If you don't do this, what a human is capable of is frightening. The beginning of the Torah, first personalities we meet, they are guiding us about the imperative for education. Again, this is not a controversial idea. Education is important. If there were 10 commandments of education, the first one probably is thou shalt parent. You should parent. You have to do this. This is not something which is optional. You're not forgive the term, you're not a sperm donor, okay? You're raising a child. You're responsible for this child. You are, by bearing a child, you're taking upon yourself the responsibility of saying, I'm going to do whatever I can to raise this child properly. Without that, who knows what humanity is capable of? Well, we do know, unfortunately. And the final heuristic I want to share today, amazing, my favorite idea perhaps. And I want to do a part 2 as well, because I spoke about Isaac and Esau and that whole tortured relationship, that whole problematic relationship. Isaac loves Esau because he makes him barbecue and he wants to bless Esau. What about Jacob and his sons and the parenting lessons thereof? Moshe, how he was trained to view the Jewish people in a way that was different than what he had initially thought was appropriate. There are other, I'm going to do a part 2 on this, but listen to this. Abraham has a son. Of course, he has a son Isaac. But before that, he has a son before Isaac. He marries Hagar. Hagar is Sarah's maidservant. And she bears a child named Ishmael. And Ishmael's problematic. When Ishmael's 14, his baby brother, half-brother is born. That's Isaac. And after Isaac is weaned at the age of 2, Sarah demands that Abraham banish both Ishmael and his mother Hagar. Why did she thus demand? Because she saw him mitzachet, which means to laugh. Well, what does that mean? Rashi says, well, the word laugh, it also connotes other things. In fact, there are verses that use this term mitzachet to describe idolatry, adultery, and murder, which is with the 3 worst sins, the 3 cardinal sins. Sarah saw in the behavior of Ishmael that he was just a terrible person, a terrible influence. Now, the truth is, we knew this already ahead of time, because before Ishmael was born, Hagar she fled, and she meets an angel, and the angel says, go back to Abraham and Sarah. You're going to bear a son. You should name him Ishmael. V'hu pere adam, and he will be a wild man. Yado bakol, his hand will be in everything. V'yad kol bo, and all hands will be upon him. Before Ishmael was born, the angel declared this kid is going to be problematic. And indeed, child's born, child problematic, so problematic that Sarah proposes to banish him. Abraham doesn't want to do it, and God says you have to listen to Sarah. And Ishmael is banished. And he gives them some water and he sends them away. Now, Hagar reappears in the story. the banishment of Ishmael, it happens in chapter 21 of Genesis, Parshas Vayera. In chapter 25 of Genesis, after Sarah's already passed, Abraham remarries a woman named Keturah. Well, who is Keturah? Keturah is Hagar. And why is she called Keturah? Why does she have a name change? Names in the Torah are always reflective of the essence of a person. Why does she embody Keturah? Because the word Keturah means ketores, which means incense. The special concoction that was burned every day by the high priest or a priest in the temple. In the temple, there was a vessel called the inner altar, the golden altar, small golden altar, not to be confused with the outer altar, which was made of copper, where the sacrifices were processed. Inside the sanctuary, there was a small golden altar. And upon that, the Kohen would burn the incense every day. Hagar is now called Keturah. Why? Because her deeds are like ketores. They're as delightful and pleasant as ketores. Now, what does this possibly mean? So I heard an idea that was cited in the name of a Rabbi Zweig from Florida. And I love this idea, so I've adopted it. Something absolutely remarkable happened in this story. You have an angel of God coming to Hagar and telling her, Hagar, you will have a child. Name him Ishmael. And this kid will be rotten. He will be Pere Adam, a wild man. And by the way, parenthetically, in Hebrew, the noun always precedes the adjective. Unlike in English, you have the adjective, tall and thick and green and description. What are you talking about? We don't even know, right? Only at the end do you describe the noun. In Hebrew, it's not like that. The noun, and then you describe what type of noun, what adjective. Ishmael was called Pere Adam. So what's the noun and what's the adjective? The noun is Pere and the adjective is Adam. He will be wild. He'll be more wild than man, the angel declares upon Ishmael. And indeed, he's banished from Abraham's home. Why? Idolatry, adultery, or murder. Pick your poison. And he's only 16 years old. A long career of criminality is surely ahead. Now, who was in Abraham's home? Abraham's home was constantly filled with idolaters. That's what Abraham did. He took the idolaters and gave them food and gave them hospitality and said, well, now, thank God. And he will bring the idolaters back to faith. A house that is teeming with idolaters, but Ishmael's just too much. He is unwelcome. And he's banished together with his mother to Egypt. But there is an epilogue to the story. Ishmael rejoins Abraham. And when Abraham died, the verse says that Ishmael allowed Isaac to go ahead of him in burying Abraham. Ishmael acknowledged the supremacy of Isaac. Rashi tells us he repented. He became righteous. We have someone, the angel says he's wild, so wild that if you're going to define him, wild is a better definition than man. And he's doing idolatry, adultery, and murder. And he's so bad and so intolerable that Abraham is forced to banish him. And he comes back. And he's righteous. How did that happen? That is the question the Torah answers when it says Hagar is now called Keturah. The mom is renamed. She is now called Keturah because her deeds are like ketores, are like incense. Now, what is the ketores? So it's a mix of ingredients, 11 different ingredients, spices and herbs and so on, that were mixed together in a very precise manner, and it was burned every day in the temple. And it created this aroma that blanketed the city of Jerusalem and its environs. So much so, the Talmud tells us that brides in ancient Jerusalem did not need to put on any perfume. They didn't need to supplement any perfume because the wonderful smell of the ketores just made everything smell delicious. And the Talmud even says the aroma of the ketores, it would travel all the way to Jericho, and the goats in Jericho would sneeze because of the aroma of the ketores. But what is the ketores? It's a combination of 11 different ingredients. And each one must be placed in the prescribed volume. So, what are these ingredients? We have the Hebrew names for them. I'm not so sure if everyone agrees to the exact identity of each one of these ingredients. But there must be 70 mana, which is a measure of the following 4 ingredients. Tsari, tziporin, chelbana, levona. These are 4 ingredients. And each one of them 70 mana, which is a measurement. And then 16 mana, 16 measures of the following 4 ingredients. Mor, which is mir. Kitsia, shibolis, nerd, and karkum. Okay. By the way, the translations are balm and anika. I don't know, I'm probably mispronouncing this. Galbanum, frankincense, we know what that is. Myrrh, cassia, spike, nard. I don't know what that is. I'm probably mispronouncing and butchering all these words. Saffron. 16 of those 4. And then kosht 12, and kilufa 3, and kinama, which is cinnamon, 9. So we have these 11 ingredients, and each one has to be the right amount, the right volume of each one of these ingredients are mixed together. And it describes how they actually mix it together, and various other ingredients, a little drop of this, a quarter of a kav of sodomite salt, and a little bit of something called mala ashon, which is something which makes the smoke go up, and wine from Cyprus. But if you don't have that, just any old wine, any old white wine that is, and something called Boris Karshina, which is Karshina lye. I don't even know what these things are, but it's a very specific concoction. And there are precise instructions for how much of each. And the Talmud even says, if you tamper with this, if you change even a little bit, if you omit any one of the spices, chayev misa, it's a death penalty. You don't play games with the ingredients of the ketores. And the end result of it is a cocktail that's nuanced and rich and aromatically sublime. But the genius of the ketores is that each one of these different 11 ingredients on its own is nothing special. And in fact, one of them, our sages tell us, and Rashi cites this in his commentary to the Torah, Talmud talks about this. One of them, which is the third one mentioned, chelbana, galbanum, it's positively rancid on its own. But when it's combined with the other 10 ingredients, not only does the chelbana not detract from the overall aroma, it actually enhances it. So the art of ketores is the art of mixing these very different ingredients into one. And the net result of it is something beautiful, something just that takes over everything. So it's an incredible aroma. How did Ishmael become righteous? How did someone who the angel said, this kid's rotten, and Sarah says he's too much, and Abram is forced to banish him? The Torah tells us, because his mother was like ketores. Her deeds were as pleasant as ketores. She understood, the angel told her, your kid is rotten. So she realized, my concoction, my cauldron, is starting with a big lump of chalbana, of this one ingredient that smells awful. But no matter how much chalbana you have, if you add the same amount of those other 3 ingredients, and then you do the math of figuring out how to add the 16 of this and 9 of this and so on, the net result can be something beautiful. So yes, Ishmael indeed began his life with awful, execrable, putrid, rancid, effluvious parts of the Torah present. His character was revolting, but Hagar didn't give up on him. She mixed the Ketores. She knew what other herbs and spices to put in the potpourri, what buttons to push, what manipulations to do, to tweak, to adjust, to refine the cocktail. And the net result is he repented. He became righteous. He was restored to Abraham's good graces. Now, what exactly the ingredients of this mixture? We don't know exactly. But of course, we could speculate. When Ishmael was banished, the verse says that Hagar carried him on her shoulders. And when he was going to die, and by the way, she put him a bow shot away because she was worried that he would even murder her. That's how crazy he was. She had unconditional love for him. And when he was sickly and on the verge of dying, she cried and she prayed for him. And when they arrived in Egypt, she found a way to channel his hobby, archery, into a profession. Oh, you like archery? Find a way to make a kosher version of that. Don't shoot Isaac. Don't shoot innocent people. Become an archer. Make a decent living out of that. And she found him a wife. She's not giving up on her son. She's adding ingredients to the concoction. And of course, Abraham contributed as well. The verse tells us that when Abraham was making the food, the banquet, for the 3 visitors who we know were angels, he tasked the lad to prepare the beef. Who's the lad? Rashi says that's Ishmael. Abraham says, okay, you're a little crazy, but why do we throw in some hospitality and some kindness? Let me train you to have that attribute. At 13, Ishmael was circumcised. Well, there's some self-sacrifice, some self-abnegation. We can argue that Ishmael got some tough love when he was banished. That must have been a very rude awakening for him. And it's painful, but it could have been productive. Another ingredient in the cauldron. The Midrash tells us that Abraham visited Ishmael in Egypt. Twice, in fact. Gives the whole story. That after 3 years, Abraham went to visit Ishmael. And Sarah didn't want him to go. So he says, listen, Sarah, I'm going to go to visit Ishmael, but I promise I will not even dismount my camel. I'm going to go there, stay on the camel. I'm not going to settle down there. No, nothing to worry about. And he arrives there and he meets not Ishmael, but Ishmael's wife, and he has a whole conversation with her, and he realizes that she's trouble. So he sends a coded message to Ishmael. Tell Ishmael when he comes back home that some old man from Canaan came to visit him. And tell him that he has some problem with his threshold in his tent, which is a way of saying your wife's troublesome. And of course, she doesn't know that she's speaking to her father-in-law. She conveys the message to Ishmael. He divorces his wife. But he realizes that Abram still loves me. He still cares about me. He still took the time and the effort to come down to visit me. This is another ingredient that's thrown into the cauldron. Another ingredient to the ketores of Ishmael. And maybe that contributed to Ishmael's transformation. And then Abram went the second time. Again, he promised not to get off the camel. This time he meets the second wife. She's righteous. And he says a nice message to Ishmael. And the Midrash ends that Ishmael knew that still, his father's paternal love for him was undiminished. Ishmael understood that no matter what, Abraham loves him. We don't know everything that happened to Ishmael and what Keturah, aka Hagar, did, but the result is Ishmael was transformed. He became righteous. He became a tzaddik in the words of our sages. And he was readmitted into Abraham's home. And when the Torah sees that, the Torah assesses Hagar's exquisite handiwork and renames her. She is Keturah. Her deeds are as pleasant as Ketores. This is a helpful lesson for all of us, because all of us, we have a mixture of good and bad character. We have some qualities and some shortcomings. None of us are condemned to be wicked. None of us. None of us are condemned to have any flaws. In fact, our sages tell us that every single human, not even every Jew, every human can be as righteous as Moshe. Of course, not in absolute terms. None of us are expected to go to heaven, get the tablets and so on. That's not the point. The point is we could be as perfect with what we can become as Moshe was with what he could have become. But we have all these flaws, all these shortcomings, all these problems. And some of them are unchangeable. Well, if they're unchangeable, that is part of our concoction. That's part of the chalbana. You add other stuff. You could create a circumstance by which that flaw actually contributes towards the net positive of the final result. We're all a mixed bag. We all have a catalog of good and bad characteristics, and some of them will not change. Ishmael is wild. It's not going to change. The angel declared before he's born, this kid is wild, and he's more wild than man. But we can add stuff. We don't have to stop there. That's the essence of parenting. Children come to us, and they have a mix of character. And some of the things cannot be changed. Hardwired, it's innate, it's built in. There's no way to undo that. And they could be negative things. But there is a way for that to contribute. Just as the chalbana contributes to the Ketores, there's a way for even that negative characteristic to contribute to the ultimate result of this child, which can be delightful. Someone may have a child and say, you know what? I really wish the Almighty delivered me a different child. This kid's got all sorts of problems. It's a terrible thing to say. But some people may have that inclination. You cannot choose the child you get. You can't. If this is what the Almighty gives you, the Almighty says, I believe in you that you have the ability to do something positive with this charge. And even if the charge is a lump of chalbana, it does not need to remain like that. And it's a lesson for us as parents, a lesson for us as people. We can be very frightened when we discover flaws that we bear inside of us. And if Keturah can make something positive out of Ishmael, we can make something positive out of ourselves. I heard an incredible idea. I love that. This I love. There's a teaching in the Talmud. A person is obligated to say, the world was created for me. It's a Mishnah, the book of Sanhedrin, page 37a, towards the bottom. A person is obligated to say, the world was created for me. What if the person is flawed, has got all sorts of problems? Ishmael-like. They're still obligated to say that. And it was observed that the Hebrew words are obligated to say, the world was created for me. It's only 5 words in Hebrew. Chayev lomar bishvili nivra ha'olam. Obligated to say, the world was created for me. Those 5 words, the first letter of those 5 successive words, spell out the word chelbana. Chayev, a ches, lomar, a lamed, bishvili, a beis, nivra, which is a nun, ha'olam, the world. That spells out the word chelbana. If you have chelbana, and you're like, I'm done, I'm doomed. No, specifically that When you see that and you experience that, you must declare the world was created for me. Even I can become a pivotal contributor to this world and to its perfection. None of us are condemned. To me, this is a powerful insight, and this is a very valuable framework. No matter what you get, you don't choose it. If you asked Hagar, would you like to have a child who is so wild that he's more wild than man, who is so completely unmanageable that Abraham, the most benevolent of all, the one who could tolerate everyone, finds him intolerable? God Almighty says, you must banish this child. Hagar would say, actually, is there any other options? Is there any other possibilities, perhaps? Any other children that I could receive? None of us seek that. But if we do have that, we learn a model given to us by Hagar/Keturah. If she found a way to make something positive, aromatic, righteous from Ishmael, none of our children are beyond the pale. None of them will be 1/100th of the problem that Ishmael was. And if Ishmael is salvageable, our children can also develop into Keturahs and something beautiful, and we have to put in the work. It's not easy. And it's a lot of work to do this Keturahs mixing. And I will add, even if you don't start off with chalbana, you start off with one of the other decently smelling herbs or spices, your job is still to be like Keturahs, to find out what else to add into this mixture. Because the net result of the Keturahs smells better than any one of these spices on their own. And that's your job. A framework, a heuristic, courtesy of Hagar and Keturah in the Torah. I shared it with the group, the people. I was so flattered. They asked me to give some insights on parenting. That made me so happy. And I'm not claiming to be the best parent in the world, but these are some of the ideas that we shared on those Sunday nights. Idea number one, if God gave me a child, he obviously believes that I can raise this child well. I can partner with him in raising a good child. I must have the ability and the tools to do it. Good parenting is good character. Good character is good parenting. Bad parenting is bad character. And bad character is bad parenting. A second heuristic. It's easier to not mess up. This is what's known as a loser's game, not a winner's game. Don't mess up. The child will grow on their own. You don't need to pull the tree out of the ground. And the Keturah principle. You cannot change and alter the child you were given, but you don't just stop there. You add ingredients until the result is absolutely delightful. Please God will do a part 2 on this. We have Isaac and Esav. What happened over there? Isaac loved Esav because he made him barbecue? He wanted to give him the blessing? What is going on over there? We have Jacob and how he relates to his children and how he delays the criticism. He holds the rebuke. And we have some lessons from Moshe, and there are probably a lot more. But we hope and we pray that we can raise good children, righteous children, responsible children, stable children, healthy children who are not only phenomenal people, but phenomenal Jews. And just thinking about this will make us better parents. Just having the exercise of considering and thinking about it. But of course, the Torah gives us the best instruction. And may we all be so fortunate to raise good children, healthy children, and raise ourselves and educate ourselves as well. It's a terrible thing, a human without education. Cain is what that looks like. Terrible, terrible, awful. And he cautions us, Chanoch, 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 educate, educate, educate. He names his son like that. He names the city that he builds like that. He sends the message for us, educate, educate, educate. Please don't all have part 2, but I hope you enjoyed part 1. You should be successful in your parenting and your self-development and self-growth. And my email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. If you want the proper spelling, in every podcast that I have the great privilege of releasing, you have the, in the notes, in the description of the podcast, it says exactly how to spell it. So you have it accurately, because if you misspell it, it won't go to my email inbox. It won't. So I won't even know. You write me a speech, you write me a message, a long-winded email, which I appreciate, I cherish. But if you send it to the wrong address, it will not come to me, unfortunately. It's got to be rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. I do have a torchweb.org, but I find it's so complicated. Torchweb.org. Too many different words that could be misspelled. So I say rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. I have another email address for the torchweb.org. That's okay. I look forward to your questions, your comments, and your feedback. And please, I will have part 2 in just a little bit.